Today we are looking at something that I don't cover very often, and that is floor standing loudspeakers. Although I think Americans, don't they call these tower speakers? Anyway, no matter the regional differences, Acoustics sent me a pair of its 50/50 floor stander, which sell for €1,700 a pair here in Europe and $2,000 in the USA, and we'll be leaning on a couple of side-by-side comparisons as we assess the 50/50 with music you'd read about on Pitchfork, The Quietus and The Wire.
This episode is brought to you by T+A, makers of the Solitaire P headphones. Click the link in the show notes for more information.
Before we start today properly, this Brian Eno compilation, the soundtrack to the movie about his life, which is started showing, I think, in the UK in the last couple of weeks. This is a 2 LP set, so it's kind of like a Brian Eno greatest hits, but it's not like a greatest hits. It's kind of a weird compilation of a lot of his stuff that goes all the way back to the 70s. So there's some vocal stuff, there's some ambient instrumental stuff, there's some new stuff. Highlights for me include Spinning Away, which he did with John Cale, which I think is the most glorious pop song ever by anybody. And then Emerald and Lime, which I think is from Small Craft on a Milk Sea. But the best thing about this album is it hangs together as a proper album, even though it's a compilation. Anyway, I've been living with the Acoustics 50/50 on and off for the past 2 months. Now they're shorter than your average floor stander, but compensate with extra cabinet depth. And on the front baffle sit two 15cm mid-bass drivers, and these sit one above and one below a 1-inch soft dome tweeter in what is known as, I think, Diapolito configuration. Now, Acoustics calls these mid-bass units continuum curved cone because their profile is neither flared nor is it straight edged. And according to the UK company's engineering team, a continually curved driver profile helps with a smoother crossover to the tweeter and stronger bass dynamics. And I'll link to further information on this in the description box below. Now, on the back of each 50/50 sits a pair of binding posts and a bass reflex port. Now remember the port because we'll be coming back to it later. And according to Acoustics, the cabinet's internals are braced point to point. I think that's fairly common at this price postcode. But what we don't see so often is the use of Helmholtz resonators inside the cabinet to help reduce the buildup of standing waves inside the speaker. And there are 4 of these Helmholtz resonators inside each 50/50. And if you want to know more about what a Helmholtz resonator does and how it works, I'll put a link in the description box below. And now comes a bit of a niggle, because the support wings that stop the speaker from toppling over, they remind us that this really is a €1,700 loudspeaker and not a €4,000 loudspeaker. Because these supports, they look and they feel a bit cheap, and I'd love to see Acoustics make something that feels a little bit more substantial for the next version, and maybe something that looks a bit classier. Also, the magnetically attachable grills that come with this loudspeaker, they do feel like they would happily sit on a €500 loudspeaker as much as a €1,700 loudspeaker. These really bring us back down to earth when we're considering the price point of the 50/50. Okay, so let's talk about sound quality, because the 5050's most impressive feat is how it marries bass reach and depth to bass articulation. So working down to around 37 Hertz, they lay a weighty and rhythmically solid foundation to Dub Xan's cover of the Police's Walking on the Moon. And this is dub music, where only from a robust low end can the rest of the song be built. And I think the 5050 throb and thump in the best way possible. They are excellent in this respect. And that low end heft displays a decent amount of dynamic thrust when handling primal screams loaded, and without compromising any mid-range clarity. And a dose of Richard Thompson tells us just how coherent and vivid the 5050 sound in the mid-range with acoustic music like that Richard Thompson track. But there's a but, and that is that the Marantz Model M1 streaming amplifier, it provokes the 5050's more crisp fried sounding treble. Now, I don't think that this is the right amp for these particular speakers. Now, fortunately, any top-end eagerness is mitigated pretty much entirely by the musical Fidelity A1 amplifier. And the A1's 25 watts per channel is more than enough for the Acoustics' 92 dB sensitivity and nominal 6 ohm impedance. Most probably because it's a Class A design with plenty of current delivery. But I am guessing there. But no matter the technicalities, I only have to play Kruder and Dorfmeister's K and D sessions to be convinced that this speaker amp combination sounds downright glorious from head to toe. The A1's fluidity neatly complements the Acoustics' rhythmic attack and its macro dynamic enthusiasm. Mind you, some of that fluidity must belong to the Kensei version of iFi's Go Bar DAC that I had convert the Shanling CD transport's digital output over USB to analog. But the amplifier isn't the only thing we have to consider when choosing loudspeakers. The room in which the speaker sits has a greater effect, I've said this many times before, it has a greater effect on what we hear than any amplifier decision. So for songs by Bob Dylan and the Stone Roses, the Acoustics floor standards present as a pretty good acoustic fit for this 6 meter by 5 meter space. But when I pull up the arty drum and bass of Photech, I hear too much bass energy buildup in this room. So this is when I reach for the supplied port bungs in the box to seal the speaker and roll off its bass earlier. So you put the bung into the port and that causes, the bass to sort of roll off at a higher frequency. But doing that makes the likes of Prince and U2 sound a bit too thin. So of course I can't be pulling those port bungs in and out depending upon which song I'm playing, because that would be absolutely insane. Now I know far more people stream than spin CDs. So to the musical Fidelity A1, I also added a Wim Pro Plus streamer. And this allowed me to play content from Tidal. Now yes, the Wim Pro Plus supports Tidal Connect, but Roon integrates Tidal in such a way that my library of FLAC files and Tidal's library appear as one mega library inside the app. So the join inside the Roon Remote app is, as far as I can tell, seamless. And that Roon Remote app runs on Android, iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and Windows. So when playing a song from Tidal, the audio travels from the cloud to the Roon server in the corner of the room, and then onto the Wim Pro Plus's Roon Ready input, where it is converted to analog by the Wim's internal DAC. And that analog signal is then sent to the A1 amp over an analog interconnect. And I'd like to thank Roon for sponsoring this video. So if we total the cost of a Wim Pro Plus, the A1 amp, and the 5050 floor standing loudspeakers, we get pretty close to €4,000. And €4,000 is where the previously reviewed JBL 4329P sit. So hello, side-by-side comparison. Because the JBL is a streaming active loudspeaker that, like the 5050, doesn't need a subwoofer. So I think the Acoustics floor standards more crisply define the player outlines on Morphine's Buena. And they infuse proceedings with just as much macrodynamic excitement as the JBL. Because make no mistake, the 5050 is a very, very exciting listen. This is a speaker that makes you sit up and pay close attention, which makes them, I think, great for watching action movies. And I would also say that the Acoustics floor standard sounds bigger and more expansive and more transparent than when a KEF subwoofer is added to the musical Fidelity LS3 5A that we reviewed last week. Now that's as true of Photech's hidden camera as it is of Lana Del Rey's California. And those two tracks also tell us that the 5050's layer separation is more overt and cleaner than the LS3 5A. Only when we swap out the LS3 5A for the soon to be reviewed Studio 89 two-way stand mount from Monitor Audio do the audible results tend to even out. But even then, the 5050's mid-range shows up as the more dynamic of the two. So I can only really conclude that the 5050 is an extremely, extremely impressive sounding loudspeaker for the money, but that it requires careful amplifier matching and that it is intended for rooms larger than mine here, larger than this one. And in fact, on Acoustics' website, it says the 5050 are for medium and larger rooms. And it says the same for the smaller 5040. So this is not a small room loudspeaker. And that's something I missed before requesting a review sample. So that mistake is on me. Anyway, if you like this video, you know what to do, and subscribe to this channel if you dig what we do here in general. Patreon is where you'll find playlists for this video and pretty much every single video we've made since early 2020. And make sure you drop room size matters into the comment section below to let us know you watched until the very end. Now, here comes a bit of a niggle, because the support wings that stop the speaker from tipping over, they really do remind us that this is a €1,700 loudspeaker. Now here comes a couple of niggles, because the support wings that stop the speaker from tipping over, they really do remind us that this is a... Now comes a bit of a niggle, because the support wings, the metal pieces that stop the speaker from tipping over, they do remind me, at least, that this is a €1,700 loudspeaker and not a €4,000. Now comes a bit of a niggle, because the support wings that support the loudspeaker to stop it from toppling over if it's pushed, they feel a bit cheap. They remind us that this is a €1,700 loud... Oh, my goodness. Now the support wing... Can't get this right. 2212.